Hey, everybody. Let's talk about what Will Smith should do next because this is important in that it really is relevant to workplace, professional positioning because we're seeing a lot of fallout as a result of this incident with Will Smith and Chris Rock at the Oscars. And I've seen a lot of people talk about what happened and like what people think, if Will was right or wrong to respond the way he did. But I haven't seen anyone as of yet say how he should proceed. And I thought this would be a timely topic as I see a lot of women leaders, which is who I typically coach, find themselves in predicament or situations that they may need to respond to, react to, and not knowing all the time how to move forward. And so I thought this is a good example of how to break this down, right? So I am Coach Marlena Bayless. I am a corporate wellness coach. And what I mean by that is I help people to be well at work, in their work, and I also help companies to create opportunities for that to happen, right? So that's me. Will has been going through a component of my, professional positioning program, which is what I like to say is mindset shift, make a mindset shift. I feel like he's definitely gone through a mindset shift in the last few years. And he talks about this in his book. If you watch the YouTube channel, especially, and if you read his book, he's been going through this mindset shift of removing this persona-led version of himself and stepping more into his fullness. And that's really the purpose of like my work and helping women with professional positioning, is to help them step into the fullness of who they are and the work that they do. And so that is what he's been speaking to, living, experiencing, and sharing with us, the world, right? And I think what happened at the Oscars is one of two things. My interpretation is that he either made a conscious decision to get up there and do what he did and come back to his seat and articulate what he did, or he reacted without being consciously driven by the fullness of who he is. And it was, in fact, a different component or version of himself that showed up and did what we all been jokingly saying, West Philly Will, or what he calls in his book, The General. That version of himself that's just super go hard, challenger, fighter mentality. And so that part of him showed up, right? So if that's the case, and the fighter mentality and, I'm going to go hard, I'm going to defend myself, and I'm not backing down to nobody or nothing. He could have very well tapped into that version of himself consciously or unconsciously, but I'm going to go with consciously you decided to do this. He decided to do that, right? So where does he go from here? Well, consciously, if you're being aware of the goal, if the goal was to put people on notice, that actually was no better place in his work life to put people on notice that the old Will is gone. If that was truly his goal, one of his goals, I think one of his clear goals was to stand up for Jada. But another goal, if this is consciously a decision and not a reaction and response, was to then let everybody, not just Chris, but everybody in the room, because they were at work, right? So this is a workplace conversation because they were at their job. This was a moment for work. Being able to then demonstrate, hey, everybody in this room know who you think I am is not who you think I am. And so you're going to meet the real me today. And that serves a real purpose for people to, they can decide if they like that version of you. They can decide if they respect that version of you. But either way, what you do is give people a level of clarity about who they're interacting with versus who they thought they were, right? And so what he can do moving forward is reaffirm and reestablish that, like, no, this was actually intentional, and double down on the fact that while I didn't come at that evening to hurt people, but as far as the character of how I showed up in that evening, you will see him again if that situation happens in any form or fashion. So one way to move forward is to double down and to stand by what it is you're saying and to not shift or change at the sign of retreat from others, right? So we have to be consistent with trusting ourselves and believing in who we are. The other part of that would be to communicate to people clearly that this is who I am, and start making different decisions and connections with folks who are, one, value what you value. That's really imperative. Like, Will should be, if people like realness and authenticity and, standing up for women, then the partnerships in which he pursues moving forward would be aligned with those things. If people who don't establish that, it's like the Red Sea. It's going to part, and you'll be able to see. But just because people move away from you or move closer to you doesn't mean it's good or bad. Because what really Will has to assess, and this has to happen no matter what, no matter whether or not he was consciously doing this or unconsciously doing it, is that he has to know what the goals are. You have to be clear on what the priorities and what his goals are moving forward. That's the only way for you to consciously continue to build and to elevate yourself to the next level throughout your life. And if the direction is not about money or how many more projects I can get, and that could be a component of it, but it's not the number one goal, then you can make different decisions and behaviors, right? So if it's not that, and that was an unconscious decision, he really didn't mean to do that, assessment is still step number one, because you got to be able to identify what was that, who was that, what version of me was that, what made me react so strongly. A lot of times what we find ourselves, and what I've seen with women that I've worked with, is that you have to be able to articulate and see and hear the narrative that you are experiencing in your mind first to be able to get in control of it. So some of the things that I like to do is really have my clients hear what they're saying, because things like, I'm going into a meeting and I feel like I have to always fight for my spot or fight for my seat, versus I'm going into a meeting and I was invited to be a part of the conversation. You're going to show up two different ways with those two different types of storylines in your mind, right? Your part of you may be preparing for war. Another part of you may be excited, and so being really clear on what the narrative is, what are the underlying tones behind those things that are also being attached or infused in the moment, because we don't know the history of Chris Rock and Will and Jada. Jada and Chris did multiple movies, Madagascar, together. So, like, his brother worked on shows with one of Will and Jada's executively produced shows. So, for it to escalate so quickly, we can assume that potentially has something to do with it, or it didn't. But there's also uncovering, well, what else is in the room with you when you're doing the things you need to do. Part of the challenges as a professional woman is knowing that there's things in the room with you that have nothing to do with you, right? You being a woman and people's perceptions and biases that come with that. If you're talking about a black woman, a woman of color, any other marginalized group, then you're also navigating potentially unconscious biases or beliefs about who you are in the moment. And you don't want to be held to that in how you behave and react and show up. You want to be able to establish your workplace presence in a way that you are controlling the narrative, and you are also demonstrating the narrative that you want to. That's super imperative to position yourself for more success. A lot of times the first step is getting the skills, right? Like, Will learn how to be a good actor. Like, that's not up for debate. He's a great actor. And no one's questioning that anymore. So that's part of the battle, is making sure people see you properly. The next step is establishing how to navigate these things and to continue to be consciously choosing the best thing that serves you next in your life and career, and making sure that you look and feel as successful as people may perceive you to be. There was a disconnect. That's why it was such a big storm with Will, because people have this perception of him that's nice, that's calm. I don't know if it would have been as surprising if, Mike Tyson got up there and did that, right? It made it seem like, man, you don't do that there. But we would not have been shocked the way that people were shocked when Will did it. It was partly because of who we identify Will to be that made that such a shocking situation. And we are all navigating people's ideals about who we are and what we're capable of. And you want to be able to, one, know what that is for yourself, then consciously decide what would serve you best and what is the goal that you're attaching these behaviors, thoughts, and actions to, so that you can move powerfully. Otherwise, you're going to be reacting and kind of feel like a yo-yo string. Like somebody's pulling your string. And that's not a position of power, which is what I'm all about, helping women be in. Keep, sustain, maintain, and grow, right? All of that. And so he would want to move forward with the assessment. The next thing would be putting in place boundaries to support the decision that needs to be made about who you're establishing and who you're growing into. So there's work around really being able to paint that picture and be clear about what that looks like for you. And then there's also the boundary of being able to put people on notice in a intentional way, right? So there may be a different way that you move in the room. Maybe he doesn't go to events. If he goes to events, maybe he doesn't sit in the front row. If he feels like people attack him, maybe he starts to give folks a list of what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. You start to designate and delegate, and that's how you create a life and work that supports you versus you living to support it. And that positions you to be feeling control, to build your confidence, to know that you are building. Because we are building something regardless if we consciously are aware of it. We're building every day. But if we're not conscious of what we're building, we could be building anything. And a lot of times what we're doing is building things for other people versus for ourselves. Because if people can see that you are gifted, you're talented, they will leverage those gifts and talents, but you may not necessarily get the recognition and reward for it. And that's where a lot of my clients sometimes find themselves, or they're feeling stuck. I think that this was a sign that Will has some work to do, and he may be stuck somewhere because this was not his finest moment, but it was a learning moment. You have to really think about, what do you want this to be the fruit? Like, how do you want this to bear fruit in your life? Because that's a choice with the situations we find ourselves in, and the type of reactions that come up to us. We get to decide how it can still bear fruit in our lives. We don't have to be a victim. We always have power. You are never powerless. You always have a choice. It's being able to see the choices before you and to consciously take action to build those choices into a powerful life. I really feel like this is something that a lot of people don't consciously think about, and Will probably didn't think about it, and he's probably thinking about it now with the people on his team. I hope so, because that's what's going to help him to move forward in his life. But these types of strategies and tools really do help to shift how your mind and thoughts lead you, which is everything. That it is the source of where we're going, and I do all of this type of work, and I cover this in my 12-week program, Professional Positioning for Women in Corporate, and it helps to really shift, one, establish workplace authority, helping you to make a mindset shift, helping you redefine, self-love, and so that you can step into the fullness of who you are. Because that's really what's at stake. Being all of you showing up in your life and world as yourself powerfully, and not letting success deplete or stress you out or make you act out, which is what we saw with Will potentially, and letting it be something that fuels you, and making sure that you orchestrate it and you position it in such a way so that that is possible. So let me know if this was helpful, insightful. What would you tell Will to do next? And, what would be your direction or advice? And if you need help with any of the things that we talked about today, I'm going to invite you to reach out to me You can send me a message, as well as set up a meeting time for us to actually have a conversation to see if this program will be helpful to you and really get you powerfully positioned in your professional life moving forward. So I am Coach Marlena Bayless. You can see more about me at CoachMarlena.com. Then I will talk to y'all next week. All right. Bye.